2FM. Game On's Fantasy Football.
And you're very welcome along to the Game On Fantasy Football podcast. It is Game Week 12 and I'm joined by Phil McGrath from Fantasy Premier League Transfers.com to tell us everything we need to know about Game Week 12. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, indeed. And it has been, with the international break, a little while since Game Week 11. So should we just run down some of the fabulous points that were earned in Game Week 11 and remind us what state the game is in?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we might as well do a quick run through.
Yeah, Aston Villa 2, Cardiff City 0, Bakuna Matata. And
I'm glad to see I'm not the only one that sings that song.
Kozak for Aston Villa. Chelsea scored, it was 2-2 with West Brom. Hazard and Eto'o for Chelsea. And Sessegnon and Long for
Never
West Brom. Crystal Palace drew scoreless with Everton. That was a bit of a surprise. But Liverpool 4-0 victors over Fulham. And Suarez with a bonus of 3, 2 goals. Skirtle with the other goals. And was there an own goal? Yes. Amorbieta with the own goal for Fulham. Pronunciation okay there?
Yeah, works for me.
Yeah. Southampton 4, Hull City 1. Lallana, Schneiderlin, Stephen Davis and Lampard with the goals for Southampton. And Sagbo scored for Hull City. Norwich 3-1 winners over West Ham. Nobody really expected that.
That's a result for Norwich. They certainly needed something, but you still have to worry for them.
Yeah, Snodgrass, Fair and Hooper on the score sheet. Morrison with the goal for West Ham. Spurs beaten 1-0 at home by Newcastle. That was one of the big surprises of the week. Remy with the goal and the winner for Newcastle. Friedel got the call up. Made 3 saves, but couldn't stop Newcastle winning that one. Man United 1-0 winners over Arsenal. The big victory of the weekend at the top of the table.
Yeah, listen, good result. I think they needed it. I think had they lost that, there would have been some serious questions asked about their title credentials. But I suppose the biggest shock of the week was Sunderland beating City 1-0. It seems that Man City's form on the road yet again has let them down, and once again they 1-0 lost to Sunderland. It's not the first time we've seen that scoreline. And
Bardsley is becoming, is he Sunderland's top scorer this year?
I think he might be. But listen, it is what it is, and take it at face value. And I was looking then the final game: Swansea 3, Stoke 3, and I remember we were talking about this game in the podcast prior to Game Week 11, and I made a snide remark about Peter Crouch. I said, who knows, he could even pop up with 2 goals. He didn't get 2 goals, but he did, however, get 2 assists. So it just goes to show you, and we did say anything was likely to happen in that game, and it most certainly did.
It did. Right, that is Game Week 11. A little reminder of that, and we shall crack on now with Game Week 12. Right, into Game Week 12. First of our 3 focus games, Phil, is where?
Top of the list.
Oh yeah, Everton and Liverpool.
Yeah, I think you've got to look at the Merseyside derby. This is going to be an interesting game. Not only because it's a derby, and derbies are notoriously difficult to predict, but we also know that there's a high count of red cards in this fixture also, and goals. But it is kind of very much a case of its defence against attack almost. Everton are they've only lost last 6, but they're coming off 2 scoreless draws. They've only managed 6 goals in 5 home games, but they have only conceded 3 during that time at home, with 3 clean sheets coming at Goodison. So you're kind of looking at that and you're thinking, the goal threat isn't there at the moment. Lukaku hasn't scored in his last 2 games. Now, there was some good news, I suppose, for Everton going into this, and the fact that Lukaku and Morelos didn't play the full 90 minutes in either of Belgium's 2 international games during the break. But Morelos did get on the score sheet against Japan on Tuesday, I believe that game was. About 15 minutes in, he got a goal. So that was
B-string Belgium team.
Is that a joke?
No, it wasn't. It was an understrength Belgian team.
I think to a large extent it was, but they still done well. There was nothing really in it. It was a chance for the managers to get a look at some players. Very much like a lot of international managers now who weren't vying for qualification.
The only difference is that Belgium have a lot of good players.
Yeah, they could probably field 2 teams.
We were talking about it in the office. We think they could be, we're looking at all the European teams who've qualified for the World Cup. We think Belgium could be well up there into the final stages in Brazil.
Yeah, I mean, I fancy a sneaky bet for them for a quarterfinal, semi-final, maybe. It depends. It depends on a number of factors. But yeah, listen, it'll be interesting to see. We'd expect them to do well given the talent they have.
What Everton players would you consider, given the fact that they're at home?
Well, this is it. I mean,
Lukaku is the obvious one. Barkley, a lot of people would have because he's so cheap.
yeah, I mean, like I was saying, it is very much a case of kind of almost defence against attack with this one because of Everton's defensive record, as fantasy managers are well aware at this point. You know, they have been getting some good points at the back. Whereas you look at Liverpool, and they've also only lost one of their last 6. They've scored 8 goals in 5 away games, but they've conceded 7. So they are conceding goals on the road. They've only got 1 clean sheet away from Anfield. But they're scoring goals. You can't argue with it. You know, Luis Suarez and Daniel Sturridge, despite the fact that people are certainly looking to Sturridge now looking to Suarez, should I say, more than Sturridge, are both still scoring. Suarez played against Jordan in the World Cup qualifier during the week. That could be an issue. However, if you believe reports, John Henry has sent his private jet to Uruguay to make sure Suarez is back in plenty of time for this one. And an interesting one, just to add a bit of fuel to the debate between Suarez and Sturridge, is that Sturridge has actually got more goals away from home with 4 as opposed to Suarez, who's only registered 2. And of the current crop of players playing at the moment for Liverpool, Steven Gerrard leads the way with goals against Everton with 7 during his career. Now that goes back to 1998, I think, if I remember correctly, but you know, it's certainly one to look at. And this game last year was 2-2, but all the goals coming inside the first 35 minutes. So it's a derby. It's hard to say. I mean, obviously, like you said, Barkley will be one that managers have looked to, but I do worry about his game time. It's been curtailed quite a lot over the last 3 weeks, with 59 minutes in game week 9, 28 minutes in game week 10, and 35 in game week 11. So there's just certainly signs there that he's now becoming a rotation risk. I think for me, the 2 players I mentioned already for Everton are probably the ones to look at this week, and Morelos and Lukaku. I mean, Morelos has been slowly creeping up there and getting in on the act with goals and assists. Obviously, Lukaku has had a blank in his last 2, but you know, there's no doubt in his quality. You've got to kind of look to him, and I think for Liverpool, realistically, you've got to look to Suarez, despite the fact it's the derby.
Sturridge is 75% chance of playing, but that leg injury should clear up to make him available on Saturday. So
yeah, you would imagine so. It's the usual 75% rule. Another thing worth noting is that Jose Enrique is going to be out for a number of weeks now. It looks like he's going to need surgery. So Sissoko is the only natural left back they have at the club. So if you've got Jose Enrique, I think maybe a switch to Sissoko won't do you any harm, and as we've already seen, he does get forward. He did get an assist a couple of weeks ago. I'll be one to consider, but really for this, it is kind of, I hate to say it, the usual suspects again, but Morelos, Lukaku, I think if you have the Everton defenders, the likes of Coleman or Baines, you're probably going to play them. I would say Baines might be worth a cheeky show for a goal or an assist, given, like I said, the nature of this game. I think there'll be quite a few free kicks, and if anything within range, you can be pretty sure Baines is going to have a pop at them, but I wouldn't be expecting clean sheets from either of the defences.
All right, let us move on to the second of the featured games. Where are you going to go to now?
Next one down.
Arsenal and Southampton.
Yeah, it's a top of the table clash. As strange as that sounds, it is a top of the table.
First against third.
Yeah, and you know, looking at the league as well, it's quite an interesting one for Southampton, because
it's nicely concertinaed up there, isn't it?
It is, because if Southampton beat Arsenal by more than 1 goal and Liverpool fail to beat Everton, Southampton will go top of the table. There's a lot on that. I think it's the first time Southampton have been top of the English league table, the top division, since the 1970s. But yeah, looking at this one, last year it was 6-1 rout to Arsenal. I can't see that happening again this year. But that said, I think there's plenty of points on offer. Arsenal, 2 defeats all season, 1 in game week 1 and then against United last week. They have registered 11 goals in 5 home games and only conceded 5 with 2 clean sheets. So, you know, they are chipping away quite well. Mertesacker obviously got a goal for Germany against England in midweek, and the fact that was played in Wembley will have done him no harm because there's no excess travelling. And Ozil didn't play against the English, so that's again another good sign for fantasy managers. He'll be well rested going into this one. And if you know, certainly listening to interviews during the week with Arsene Wenger, you know, he really does have hasn't, should I say, underestimated the potential that Ozil has to drive Arsenal forward. I think a lot rests on him, and we'd expect him to do quite well in this one. But then you got to look at Southampton. I mean, I heard Pochettino today, during his press conference, and he kind of said the points we've got so far this season, we deserve to be where we are. We'll keep going, and by the end of the season, wherever we finish is wherever we finish. And I thought that was fairly admirable, that he wasn't saying that, we're going to stay here, we're challenging for Europe. He was very realistic, and I think there's a lot to be said for that in an age where there's, obviously it's a results-driven business, but I think the fact that he's realistic about what he has and where they are at the moment says a lot for how well they're grounded. And then obviously looking at the three players who were called up to the England squad, Lallana and Lambert and Rodriguez, I think it's the first time in history there's been three Southampton players in the English setup. Now I'm open to correction there, but I think so. But the Saints have been doing well.
Matt Letizia only counts as one.
Even though he was that good.
Yeah.
Has Letizia got caps?
Oh yeah.
Anyway, Saints are unbeaten in the last 6. Their last defeat was back in game week 3 to Norwich, of all people, believe it or not. But they are struggling for goals away from home. They've only registered 4 goals in 5 games. But they're not conceding. They've only conceded three goals away from home with 2 clean sheets. And mentioning the 3 English players that were called up, Lallana and Lambert didn't play the full 90 minutes v Germany. In fact, I think it was Lallana came off to allow Lambert to come on, and Rodriguez didn't play at all. So that's good news in terms of rest and rotation there, that they will have had a break. But it's very much a case. I think Lallana is certainly one fantasy manager should be very, very interested at the moment, the way Southampton's form is. Ordinarily on any other given game week, we will be looking at Southampton to continue their good run at the back. I think this week is a touch too far. And then you could argue that Lambert might be a contender for third striker after his returns last week. But I'm not overly convinced at the moment. I think there's a lot of the play in Southampton is coming through the midfield, and it can bypass Lambert at times. If it's not the big ball into him, he's struggling to get onto it. But I mean, with 2 assists last week and a goal, he's going to catch the eye. But for me, I'm just holding off. But certainly, if we can get some meaningful returns out of him over the next week or two, I think he could be one to fill that third striker role for you. But there's goals in this one again. I think there has to be.
All right.
Again, usual suspects.
Yeah, it's Arsenal pretty much. Arsenal players winning out on top there. Right, the third ever featured games this week is
at the Etihad.
Yeah, Manchester City are at home to Spurs.
Yeah,
it'll be a big game on the Sunday at 1:30.
It is indeed.
Tough game. Now, City had been in good form before the international break. Will they be able to pick that up?
Well, I mean, obviously, as I alluded to a little earlier, I mean, City's away form has been rather worrying. I think they've only won 1 game away from home, and that was at Upton Park. But home form has been fantastic. They've scored 20 goals in 5 home games. Most teams haven't even scored 20 goals all season yet they've managed to do it in 5 games at home alone. But they have lost 3 of the last 6, and all 3 of those were away from home. So looking at this one, you've kind of got to fancy them at the Etihad with 3 clean sheets there coming along so far this season. And Aguero was the man on form with 5 goals and 5 assists in his last 5. He didn't do it last week. Very, very disappointed with that. I fancied them for some big returns.
Well, they're not playing Sunderland this week, so they should be okay.
So they should be all right, exactly. And looking at City, Silva's still out, so Nasri looks set to come in, and Fernandinho was a doubt, but he's 75% again, so I expect him to make a return. Although I don't think there's too many fantasy managers really looking to Fernandinho for points. But just to keep you abreast of the situations there, and then
0.6%. He's a real differential at some point in the season.
He's gonna be at some point, But probably to someone who set up their team in game week 1 and hasn't changed it since.
Possibly. Yaya Toure, I suppose.
Set piece prowess speaks for itself. That's where he comes into his own. But for me, I think Nasri is a decent differential to have a look at while Silva's out, and certainly Aguero is the one to look at. I wouldn't be looking to City's defence at all at the moment.
I still have Zabaleta. I'm still considering cashing in and getting someone else, but
yeah, anyway. At this point, though, if I were you, I probably would. Spurs, on the other hand, they've lost 2 of their last 6, and both of those were at home. So you kind of got to look at it and say we've got one team who can't play away, and the other team who can't play at home. And lucky enough for both of them, it works out well.
Soldado doesn't really seem to be
He's
top
not.
class.
I think he is, but it just hasn't clicked for him. Whether it's that he hasn't settled or that Tottenham haven't found the style of play that suits him, it's hard to say. But they are struggling for goals. You don't expect Tottenham to go out and score 3 or 4. And that's been the case. I mean, they've only got 4 goals in 5 away games so far this season, but they have only conceded 1 goal away from home all season, which is very impressive when you think about it. But you'd have to fancy them to concede. I do think that Soldado might be worth a shout this week. I think if you have him, I would play him. I think there are going to be chances. I fancy this game to be fairly stretched. I think Soldado will get a chance or two, and I also think that Townsend will get some chances again for the same reasons that it's good. The game is going to be stretched. Both teams are going to be going for it. I think there's going to be space in between, in behind, and certainly with Townsend's pace, I think he could do some damage. So they'd be kind of where I'd be looking at for both teams. It'd be Yaya Toure and Aguero, and then Townsend and Soldado.
All right. They are the 3 featured games. Next up, it is best of the rest. Where do you want to start with this one? Who will you be looking for those marginal players?
Well, I tell you, I'll actually go to West Brom.
Okay.
Because I have 3 players here.
All right.
Surprise.
West Brom at home to Aston Villa.
Yeah.
It is 8 o'clock on Monday, that game.
Monday night game, yeah. I do like having a bit of interest in the Monday night game. It just makes the weekend seem that little bit longer. I don't know.
Yes.
Maybe it's just me, but it just helps drag it out a little bit. I don't like when I've nothing going in the Monday night game.
Yeah.
But I think West Brom are good value. They're starting to turn a corner. And I think you'd have to fancy them. Against Villa. Villa are struggling for goals. I know they won 2-0 last time out. But they've only scored 2 goals in the last 5 games, and that was the last time in game week 11. Benteke hasn't really returned to form since his hip flexor injury, and that's a problem, and for that reason I think a clean sheet could be one to look at for the Baggies. I think Bowes Myhill at 4.5 million is one to look at. If you need a cheap keeper to bring in, he could be one to fill a gap for you. And Gareth McCauley at 5.4 is also another to have a look at. He was one of my little favourites a year or so ago.
Yeah, he's a big, tall defender. He always goes up for the corners, and he occasionally gets his head onto the end of something, and he can score a goal.
Yeah, well, he's 2 goals and an assist so far this season. In fact, he's a goal and an assist in the last 2 weeks. So a 5.4 at a defender, you can't really argue with that, but let's be honest, that's not going to be week in, week out, but I think he is worth a look. If you're going to bring a defender in for this one, why not him, because he does have that potential to get some attacking returns. And the third man is Sessegnon. I did wonder about his move to West Brom when he did go, but the more and more you learn about the situation at Sunderland, it becomes clear that it wasn't so much that he wasn't wanted. I think more so, he knew the ship was going down and he wanted to jump nice and early. Now, obviously, that may change that Di Canio's gone, but I mean, he's starting to finally find his feet at West Brom as well. A goal and an assist in the last 2 weeks for him, and he's going to be key. Let's not forget, though, this is also a derby.
It is
a hotly contested derby at that, because the two sets of fans, there's no love lost there.
West Midlands derby.
But it's gonna, again, someone like Sessegnon I think will be key for the Baggies, because he's been around the block a little bit. If you think of the likes of the Time Wear derby, it's something very, very similar with that kind of intensity.
Sorry, West Brom are turning the corner, and Aston Villa have been around the block. Who's been around the block?
Sessegnon. Yeah, we're driving all over the place.
Yeah,
Sat nav's gone nuts.
Yeah, hopefully they don't turn into a field. That was the magic cow. Sorry.
But Sessegnon has been around the block. This game is certainly one that's going to call for cool heads, and I think he's one to consider at 6.6 as well. He's not that expensive, but having said that, when you look at the likes of Ramsey, who's 7.3, if you had it, I know which way I'd be going, but certainly I do think he's one to consider if you're looking to fill a gap in the midfield, and I think he could do worse at the moment, because he does look like he's going to start hitting some form.
Benteke, he's picked up a little knee niggle, 75%. He'll probably start because they need him to start. But
yeah, I think they do. Well, in fairness, they do need him to start, but he's not scoring goals, and I think that's the problem. That's why they need him to get game time. The more he plays, I think the better it's going to be for Villa. When you look at it, with Vyman still a doubt, Agbonlahor is still a doubt. They've only really got Kozak up front. Now he's done all right since he's been brought in, obviously, but. Yeah, I think Benteke should be alright to start, and I don't know. I just don't see him doing it this week. I think he's going to need more time. There's something not quite right with him. I just can't put my finger on it. But yeah, that's kind of that game. That's where I'll be looking at.
Can I bring you to Newcastle?
That's exactly where I wanted to go.
See, because I was having a look at this, and Newcastle and Norwich, Newcastle in good form. They seemed to have the corner that West Brom are at, right? Newcastle turned that corner, went down the road, did a handbraker, did another handbraker, and flew around the next corner. Yeah? Yeah, so they're flying.
Yeah, they're doing quite well. Yeah, I actually have...
That was all in third gear, by the way.
I've 3 players for Newcastle looking at this week. I think Tim Krul is one again. I think I'd fancy him for a clean sheet. Against Norwich, we know Norwich are struggling for goals. They've only managed 2 on the road so far this season, and for the same reason, again, I think if you wanted a defender, I think Mbiwa at 4.4 is a very cheap one to look at, and also a differential. And then like Remy is the other, 7 goals in his last 7 games. His price has dropped to 7.9 million. But I expect that to start to rise again. I think it may rise to 8 before the weekend is out. And he, at the moment, is probably the best contender for your third striker spot because he's the most consistent in and around that price bracket. If you look at the likes of Lukaku and Benteke, who he's probably competing with that kind of money, they're not on form as much at the moment.
It's funny though with Remy. I was just looking at his prices as he was scoring goals and his price was still falling.
Dropping.
So
yeah.
It's a strange
because
one.
Newcastle had a tough run of fixtures, but they won. They bet Spurs, they bet Chelsea. I don't think anyone's seen that coming.
Yeah.
And I think if Newcastle are probably honest, they didn't see it coming. Now I listened to a very
same price by the way as Romelu Lukaku. I think 7.9.
No, is Lukaku 7.9?
He might have gone back up now.
Sorry, mine's telling me he's 7.7, but that's how much I'd get from him. He's 8.
Okay, so he is 8.
Well,
okay.
I'm not.
He is, yeah.
I'm not going to lie to you. I was looking at this earlier on today, and I was thinking of doing the swap for Lukaku and Remy. But guess how much I'm out by?
0.1. It's always that one.
It's always the one.
Yeah.
So that's a no-go for me at the moment. But yeah, I think Remy is certainly one you'd have to consider this week. Norwich are in free fall, I suppose. Now they did win last time out, but on the road we've seen what's happened to them. And I think they're still reeling from that 7-1 defeat at the hands of City.
They don't have a lot of confidence on the road, that's for sure.
No,
they struggle at home, but they've no confidence on the road.
Listen, it'll have done them no harm for Hooper to get on the score sheet last time out. I think they need him to start scoring goals.
Kabai, I know last time you were sort of saying check him out now. He's going to try and play himself out of there. And
yeah, well, never mind play himself out there. There's something else now has come into the equation at Newcastle. And I'd actually forgot that I wanted to mention it, so thank you.
No problem.
Well, the fact that France managed to come back from 2-0 down to qualify for the World Cup.
We were all very happy about that in this country.
We were ecstatic. And another dodgy goal.
Yeah. Well done, France.
Although, the only thing I was pleased about is that there was a certain French weather girl who said prior to the game that she would...
it's cold out there.
That she would do the weather report El Nudo.
Okay.
In the nip.
Yeah. Is that what El Nudo means, but not in France?
Not in France,
She was talking bad Spanish,
She was.
Okay.
And she said she'd do the weather report in the nip if France qualified, thinking they're 2-0 down, they're really not playing well, they're not going to do it. They did. She did.
She did? She did it?
She did.
Is it on YouTube?
It is.
Okay.
Go, my friends.
All right. We'll be back next week.
But yeah, I mean, that's something now that comes into play at Newcastle because of the amount of French players they have there. There's going to be a couple of them looking to secure a spot in the plane to Brazil. That's got to be huge. And
weather's great in Brazil.
It's not all it's great. The football is great.
Football's good. The music isn't bad.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's going to be something that's going to come into the equation. So you have the likes of Kabai and Remy and half the team basically who are French, who want to try and get a look into the French squad. So that's gonna give a little bit of added impetus to Newcastle. So
maybe.
Yeah. So yeah, that's something also to bear in mind.
Sunderland, resurgent Sunderland.
No.
They're at home to Stoke. Chelsea away to West Ham.
Yeah, I mean Hazard. In fairness to him, it wasn't a penalty against West Brom. Lampard was off the pitch, but he still stepped up and coolly converted, and that's what you need. So for me, it's him or Oscar. That's really what it comes down to. With the Chelsea midfield, it's whichever one you have. I fancy Hazard this week. But if you have Oscar, I certainly wouldn't be shy about playing him. And I think Samuel Eto'o was worth a little cheeky outside show.
Yeah, 8.3.
Yeah.
Torres is gone.
Torres is out. Well,
Baz
Torres is actually his due return date is this weekend.
Okay.
But at the moment he's still listed as out. But
Watch that space.
yeah, keep an eye on it. But I think Eto'o could be a sneaky outside shout. He 1% ownership. He's a decent differential, and we did say a couple of weeks ago if he starts scoring goals, he could be one to look at. Scored last time out against West Brom, and so that's 2 goals now and 2 assists for him so far this term. And I just had keep an eye on him. But if you wanted to take a gamble, he might be the gamble I take.
All right, the other team, of course, Manchester United, are away to Cardiff City, and I mean,
well, there's
it's a strange.
It is
another
strange.
strange season for
well,
United.
it gets even stranger. I suppose I get the players out of the way that I was looking at, and now I'll tell you why I'm a little bit concerned.
Grand.
Fancy United for a clean sheet. I think Cardiff, aren't really free scoring at the moment.
No.
So Everett for me will be the one I'd be looking at, just because there is a bit of rotation in the rest of the United ranks at the back. So 6.3 for him. And then Robin van Persie, 4 goals in 4 games. He'll be looking for 5 and 5 this week, and that's kind of where I was looking. But Van Persie pulled out of the Dutch national squad with citing groin and toe injuries. Now they're ongoing. They're not something new. He's had them for a little while now, and he still managed to play. And I think maybe it's a case that there was nothing riding on the Dutch games. Therefore, David Moyes may have kind of said, listen, you could do with the week's rest. There's no point in you playing. There's nothing on the table. So, take the week. I do expect him to play. I don't see it being any problem. But the one problem that United do have is their midfield. Because Carrick is out. Fellaini still has that wrist injury.
Yes.
And when you're looking at the options they have available to them, central midfield is becoming a real problem.
Now in the game, Fellaini is listed as available.
Oh yeah, he's fine. I mean, it's a wrist injury again, something that's been ongoing for a little while now. And David Moyes has said he does need surgery.
How did he get that?
I don't know. I think he fell off his bike.
Must have. Because Townsend has a wrist injury as well. Very popular wrist injuries.
He probably fell off his bike.
Did
Either
he?
that or they were watching the weather report in France. There is a shortage.
Was it a cold night?
Not particularly.
Thanks for the picture.
But there are worries in the United central midfield now because, I mean, yes, like I said, Fellaini's wrist injury is something that David Moyes has said he does need surgery on, but there's a 2-year window that has to be done in. I don't know how they can determine that. Yeah, you need an operation, but you can have it within 2 years. I don't get it. But there's a problem in the central midfield. It looks like Giggs, who's knocking 40, may have to come in because Carrick now looks like he's going to be out for a while. Or you have Anderson, who hasn't really played at all in the league this season and looks to be on his way out in January.
Says he wants to stay and fight for his place.
That's only because he likes the hamburgers.
Okay.
So
have those at Fulham as well, apparently.
But that's the problem. And then there is the option available to Moyes to push Rooney back into the midfield. Now, we've heard him time and time again say that he wants to play Wayne in his natural position, which is obviously up front. But I'm just wondering, could we see Rooney drop back into the midfield? It's all suspect and circumstantial at the moment, but it's just something to be aware of, that Rooney could get pushed back, or United could have trouble in the midfield. It could be a bit disjointed, and it could stunt the attacking potential of Van Persie and Rooney if Rooney continues to play up front. Now, he could try and push Kagawa into the centre of midfield rather than playing him off the striker. There's a number of things they can try and do, but just as it's been over the last while, there are no natural replacements really there that I'd have any faith in, I suppose, is the way
I'm looking forward to seeing Adnan again. Haven't seen him in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I expect him to start this weekend. He could also be one to look at. But yeah, I mean, for me, I think United clean sheet is probably going to be, reasonably assured. I'm gonna regret saying that, I think. And Van Persie, you'd have to fancy now, with 4 goals in his last 4 games, is on some kind of return. So you've got to look to him for goals. And outside of that, where else would I like to go?
I think we've been everywhere.
No, let's have a look at Hull. I fancy Hull for a clean sheet this week against Palace.
It's a good one for them to target anyway.
It's kind of one of those games that both sides will have looked at the start of the season and said these are the type of games we need to be winning if we have any chance of survival.
I have bought Liam Rosenior a few weeks ago just as a squad player. I think I picked him up for 3.9. He's now 4 at the back. I might play him this weekend.
Did he get a goal or an assist?
He did. He had 9 points 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
so
was something, all right.
Yeah.
But I mean, like Palace, they're not really scoring. They have 6 goals in 11 games, which kind of tells you all you really need to know at the moment.
Robbie Brady is 75% chance of playing after that hernia operation. Well, I think he is okay. So the word we got
that's been niggling away obviously for a little while. We thought he kind of made a full return. Steve Bruce did say he kind of rushed him back a little bit soon. He forced to sit him out again.
Yannick Sagbo causing a lot of headlines up front.
I wouldn't look anywhere else. I think there's value in the whole defence this week with Palace, especially given that Palace are on the road and they've only managed 2 goals away from home all season. I'd be looking there, and for me, I think Davis would be one to have a look at there for them. And have I anyone else on my list? I think that's about it. I'm out.
All right, that's the best of the rest done. After this, it is Captain's Picks. The most important question of every week: who will you captain?
It's a tricky one.
It is a tricky one
because there's a couple of usual suspects involved in big games. So you look, automatically Aguero, they're at City at home, okay, that's grand, but they're playing Spurs. Spurs have had a very solid defence so far this season. Right.
Arsenal playing Southampton.
Arsenal playing Southampton. Yeah, Southampton are playing very, very well. Southampton aren't really conceding. Yeah, Merseyside derby as well.
Chelsea away to their London rivals West Ham. Anything could happen. Chelsea.
I don't fancy Chelsea captain picks so far this season because there's been no one dominating. Like, they've all been kind of getting in on the act. So you don't have the likes of an Aguero or a Suarez who's getting, loads of goals, loads of assists. It's kind of spread around reasonably evenly at Chelsea. So that worries me. It's a tough one. Realistically, the only place I can see that kind of warrants a definite armband shout is Van Persie, because we know what he's capable. He's back on form and they're playing Cardiff.
All right.
Now, outside of that,
I'll give you one.
Well, you're probably going to give me the one I'm going to tell you.
Well, Arsenal, I know the game against Southampton is tough, right? But when you've got a player like Mehmet Ozil, sometimes you just have to back him he is better than every other player in the league. So this is one of those games at home, even against tough opposition, you have to back your big players.
Oh, absolutely. I think what's important to state at this point as well is that this week is a week to be realistic about your returns when it comes to your captains. I don't think there's any legitimate shouts for 2 or 3 goals a game, or a goal and 2 assists. I think very much if your captain gets a goal, I'd be reasonably pleased, unless there's some bizarre results. Now, the other person who I would consider hanging the armband on is like Remy, for the reasons we spoke about. I think Van Persie is a legitimate shout. I think Remy is also one to have a look at.
Newcastle Norwich is probably, on paper, looks the easiest fixture of the week.
That's what worries me, though, because Newcastle have done it in games against big clubs, whereas now they're expected to win.
Yeah,
that can have an effect on teams as well. So there is that concern. But I think for me, Van Persie is the outright captain show. Having said that, I still think Aguero will get a goal. I do think he'll score at home against Spurs. But the safest option for me is Van Persie. I think Remy is probably the other. I can't look to Suarez at Liverpool because it's a derby game, and that game anything can happen. And with his temperament, you wouldn't know, he could end up with a red card.
Okay.
And then you've got his jet lag as well. Coming back from Uruguay, is that going to have an effect on it? And the fact that he's only registered 2 goals away from home. Admittedly, he's only played 6 games since his ban in the league, but it's still a slight concern. So it is a tough week out there. And might I say that because the way the fixtures are, it might be no harm to have a cheeky punt on the likes of a like Remy, to try and differential to get you some points.
I've no Newcastle players this week. I don't intend. I'm going to wait until I have 2 transfers in the bank. I might jiggery-pokery next week, but I'm going to leave my squad settled this week, which means no Newcastle players, so I don't have that option.
Yeah, well then, like I said, it's Van Persie. Like, I mean, it is. It's really, really tough this week. I can't argue with anyone who gives the armband to Suarez or Aguero. I really can't, but I do think that Van Persie or Remy could have the potential to get greater returns.
Well, I'm captaining Ozil this week, and I've just made my decision that Aguero will be my vice captain.
Booyah.
So that's as good as I'm going to get this week.
Yeah, I'm a bit as clear as mud this week, but it really is that kind of tricky.
It is. It's that sort of a game week 12, and nothing obvious jumping out at you. So it's one of those ones you have to think your way through. So they were captain's picks. Right, just time to tell you about live time and a few other things.
Yes, we will be live as per usual Saturday morning 10:30 on the Twitter machine.
Yeah, the last hour before the deadline goes red. I think. Does it go red? No, there's no real colour for the deadline. Anyway.
If there was, it would be red.
Yeah, it would be. Anyway, for the last hour before the deadline, you can get all the last minute advice and rumours about team selections from the lads at fantasypremierleaguetransfers.com. On Twitter, it's at fantasypremtips. From 10:30, hashtag live time, and the lads will try and answer as many questions. A little tip, you might just read some of the previous questions, because generally everyone asks the same sort of questions.
You can get some repeats.
Yeah, you
so
can,
if we don't get to your question, maybe just have a scan through. We may have answered it already.
Hashtag live time, search for that hashtag and go back through it, but the lads will get to as many as they can.
And also for our those of you in our members area, the Gameweek 12 points predictions are now available, so you can go on and see how many points we're predicting those players to get, so you can check that out over on the site.
And we will be back with a preview of Game Week 13. There are some very tasty ties in Game Week 13, including a little White Hart Lane meeting of Spurs and Manchester United. More about that next week. Until then, have a wonderful week.
Slán.
Slán live.